Hi there, welcome back to Bernama Today. Thanks for being with us. It is about 12:15 p.m. and things are definitely fueled up right here on the show. So make sure you keep it locked on. I'm speaking to Faridah Hameed. She's a leadership coach. She comes on the show regularly as well. Today we're debunking the myth that women lack self-confidence. Is this true? Faridah?
No, it's not true. And that's why I'm really excited to talk about it today because I want to frame this conversation a little bit and give it a bit of context. I think a lot of times when we talk about women, the issue of self-confidence always comes up. But there's a new study that came out in the middle of this year, which was done by the European School of Management and Technology in Berlin, that actually went ahead to try and challenge this notion that women lack self-confidence in the workplace. And so, just to take a step back, in 2014, there was a book that was published called The Confidence Code. It was done by two female journalists, published in the US. And what they did was they interviewed a lot of women leaders across many sectors, politics, sports, military, and the arts. And they asked them how self-confidence, or the lack thereof, impacted their success, their leadership opportunities, and as well as sense of fulfillment. But what they did in the book was, at that time, they cited quite a lot of research that reinforced this phenomenon that women did lack self-confidence. And so it became a situation of looking at the symptom. Like, you know, when you have a sickness, right? So the symptom became the lack of self-confidence and the cause became women, right? So, and all the literature at that time largely reinforced that. So, which is why you saw the rise, even I made the mistake, the rise of helping women be more assertive and to speak more, to speak better, to use more assertive language and as such. But what this study did is actually, they found out that actually it's not that women lack self-confidence, and I was so happy to hear that, because there was always a part of me that felt like all the women that I knew, not that we're confident all the time, because everybody has moments of self-doubt and all that, but what it said was that it is not that the women lack self-confidence, but the structures within the workplaces do not support the advancement of women in terms of evaluation and other biases that are very subjective. So if you keep asking the symptom, you ask women to keep changing, but the main cause, which is the structures within the organizations, are not changing, then you're actually putting the cart before the horse. So
absolutely.
This is where the problem is.
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, because for years, decades, centuries, women have been perceived as the weaker sex. And so therefore, low self-esteem, low confidence, we can't do this, we can't do that. So obviously the structure, like you said, and it's just not in the workplace. I think it even begins as early as home.
Yeah, I mean, what the Berlin study did was, it showed that actually in the evaluation, they found that while self-confidence was a key metric for the success and leadership opportunities for men, do you know what the metric was for women? Metric was how kind and how caring and how social they are. So when you have two such different metrics on which men and women... That's
discriminating to us.
Yeah, so that's the gender bias that comes in. But you are right, there are a lot of socio-cultural norms that are in place, which start when girls are very young as well.
That's right.
So that is something that we also do need to look at. But I think the heartening thing about this study is that, let's stop saying that women lack self-confidence, because they don't. But what we need to look at is, what are the structures, maybe in schools, maybe in homes, and even in the workplace, that need to be changed.
Let's talk about the workplace. What can change? What can be the smaller milestones or the easier milestones that we can start to implement change?
The easiest milestone is to encourage, for human resource people in particular, to ensure that they look at the evaluations that they have right now and look at where all the biases may be in there as well. How are men being evaluated and how are women being evaluated? Now, there is also a school of thought that says you cannot be totally objective, because we are human. There's always going to be some subjective input there. But I think as much as we can to equalize in terms of the evaluation. So for example, if women are being judged on how warm and caring and social they are, shouldn't that be a metric for men as well?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So there is a lot of study out there, and I think if there's HR people who are interested in this, I think if you're a multinational, probably the global office is working on it.
Yeah.
If not, go online. There should be lots of little things you can do now. That's the big picture.
Okay.
Now, in the small picture, on the day-to-day sort
That's
of
right, because
getting
that's
together,
where it really matters.
We have to look at the language that we use as well
Yeah.
in terms of how we describe women. And this is not just men, it's even the way women describe other women.
But is this
right?
a change that has to come from top to bottom?
No, I
Because-
always believe change has got multiple channels, right? So we always wait for change to come from top to bottom. We are going to be waiting forever. So I think on the more sort of the smaller scale in the workplace, I think women and even men who may not be so extroverted should be encouraged on a weekly basis to talk about their achievements. Because otherwise, see, women don't self-promote not because
Yes.
they lack self-confidence. It's because there's been so much data that shows that they have a backlash if they self-promote, right? Because a woman then is seen as what?
Boastful,
Exactly.
egoistic.
But a man who
but
talks
will-
about what he has
Oh, that's
achieved.
good that he's spoken up. He's sharing what he knows.
That's right.
This kind of behavior, I think, will not last for long. I think, where if you talk about young girls as well these days are very confident. They're very
Yes.
sure of themselves. But at the same time, there are so many who need a boost and who need to kind of break those glass ceilings as well. What can we do to start, like you said, if the appraisal comes, the woman is graded differently and the man is, but aren't the templates the same?
Okay. This is the problem. The problem is the template, right? Because the template has been used for a long time and no one has actually gone into the template and said, okay, where are we having all those biases? And there may be biases towards men as well. Because not all men are vocal and extroverted. There are many men who don't want to talk about their achievements, who are also scared. But I've always said this, and I believe this with all my heart, that whatever you do to help women also helps men.
Sure.
Right? So I think that is the template that we have to look at, to how can we remove as much of the gender bias obstacles and have gender neutral language. Having said that, also in the vacancies and the hiring ads, you look at the language that is used in some of these. They're always saying things like work long hours, must be willing to travel around the world.
extensively, yeah.
These automatically, unconsciously remove a lot of women from going for these jobs. Are these the most important aspects of the job?
But
No.
if the job requires that,
Right, but what are the most important aspects of the job? That you help build profitability for the company, that you influence
Hardworking,
teams.
honest.
Yes, those integrity, influencing teams. But then they highlight these things, which automatically then a lot of women who may be at a stage where they're having young kids may not want to consider. Because the reality is, we are also moving away from this thing about working long hours. And I've spoken about this
Yes,
many times on
yes.
these shows. So why are we reinforcing those things? It's not about how many hours you are working. At that stage when you're going to leadership roles, it's the results that you are bringing up. It's not, the 12 hours that you're putting in place, because the data shows that people who work extremely long hours are not very productive either. Right?
So these changes obviously need to start from within the organization. It's got to be internal. Obviously, the control center will be
Yes.
HR.
Yes.
Do we have any local examples, any companies or any businesses, organizations that have tried to, bring about this change?
What I do know is there, in terms of the work-life balance issue, there are some MNCs, some banks which have instituted this thing where they have made work-life balance across the board for male and female. The reason they do that is because they want to remove any friction there is to ensure that they can move women up the career ladder, give them promotions, so that they're willing to take on those promotions, but give them an option that they may be able to work remotely as well. The good thing is they've made it gender neutral, right? So there's a little bit. MNCs will lead the way because they usually have a global template. The issue is most companies in Malaysia, SMEs, I think 97%.
Yeah, correct.
And the Asian culture remains very much face-to-face. If I don't see you sitting at your desk and working, you're not getting work done.
Yeah.
So this is where the problem is. Because all the data that's coming out now, in fact, Harvard did a study as well, which correlates to what I'm talking about the fact that women don't have access to senior management in terms of them wanting to have promotion. The reality is that mid-management leaders are just too 2 people away from senior management. So the access is there, but the problem is the languaging within the organization and the evaluation, which is where the problem is.
What are the solutions?
These are the solutions, which means that we have to put in place, the HR people are pivotal to this. They must work with senior management to bring up these issues. These must be strategic HR people. Now, the other issue is women themselves must get together and have a cohesive voice about what needs to change. The issue that a lot of women face is the ones who are moving up the ladder tend to work in isolation because there's not very many of them, right? So this is where the problem is. So I would encourage that women get together, come up with a policy, come up with some ideas, because when you go as a group to see senior management, it's a lot more powerful, right? Instead of asking one individual person to go and sell the idea. So that is what I believe is the key. But then there's a whole story about young girls as well, and how we need to ensure that they do not buy into this phenomenon that says that they lack self-confidence. Because I think you're seeing with this generation, they don't actually lack self-confidence. They actually are quite vocal. They want to speak out. They have a lot of ideas. And I find with Generation Z, which I think your child is part of, they don't actually see things in terms of gender.
Right.
They actually see things
or race or color.
Yeah, or race or color, right? So for them, all that is very fluid. What they look at is the character of the person. What they look at is the results of the person. So I think with this new generation, we will see that sort of fall by the wayside eventually. Yes.
Before I let you go, largely we've been told to lean in, and of course this is famously from Sheryl Sandberg, but based on what this research shows, that this is not women but the structure, like you said, the principle of lean in, is that obsolete, or is that a concept we can still
Lean in
apply?
was written a couple of years ago, again when all this data was very much about that women lack self-confidence. But how can you lean in when there's no structure to support you? So this is now the fundamental issue. So which is why I say that if you're going to lean in as a group. Don't lean in as individuals.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Faridah, for being with us and really shedding light on this issue. I think we see it, we know it, but how much do we really understand it? And hopefully this has brought light to this topic within your organization as well. Ladies, start the conversation going, team up. It's not about being, hard, or it's not about being difficult, but it's wanting to bring about change that's in fact betterment for all, because as you said, if there is a change for women, it also affects men positively. On that note, we take a break. Keep it locked on to Bernama News Channel.